you're definitely going to want to check out today's video. It is Project Avalanche, or the motion design module in Unreal Engine. Let's take a look at it. Hey, how's it going everyone? My name is Brandon Clementson and welcome back to another video here on Glasshand. Today we are going to talk about one of my most anticipated software updates since I can remember. It's called Project Avalanche. And what Project Avalanche was supposed to be was more of a motion design tool set for people in obviously the motion design industry, broadcast, film, to do like more linear type of content, or even do graphics live on the air for different sports networks and stuff like that. So today I'm going to show you how you can get this branch of the engine where it's going to appear in everything. So hopefully if you watch the whole video, you're going to learn a lot. That's what I hope to do with all these videos with you guys. Okay, so how can you get this version of the engine? Well, it's actually not even out yet.
Move this man!
It's going to come out in 5.4. So what you can do is you can go to Epic's GitHub page and fork the engine like I have. So I now have it under my association in GitHub, so that way I can make changes to it if I want to, download it, test things out. Every once in a while you're going to want to sync the fork, and once you download this you're going to compile it in Visual Studio, and what that will give you is a binary for Windows that you can actually open and take a peek at some of the things that are coming out. So I have to say that 5.4 is not out yet at the current recording of this video, so this is still being heavily developed at this point in time. But once it's actually released, you'll be able to dive into all the tools that I'm going to show you here. So this is like alpha stuff, you know. It's pretty amazing that we can actually keep up with the developers and see what they're doing, but just keep that in mind. This is not for production yet. Okay, so if you guys want to see a video on how to compile the engine, I can do that, but that's not what we're here to do today. But the first thing you're going to want to do once you get this version of the engine is you're going to want to make sure that you have the motion design plugin enabled. So what this will do, if I can type motion design, it's going to load up some of these other dependencies here. So we got advanced renamer, which is really cool, custom details view, you know, dynamic materials, geometry cache, all this stuff that's primarily in the production, the virtual production template. A lot of those offenders are here as well, so you're going to see a lot of the same stuff, but some new stuff as well. There's a lot of really cool new stuff. And then once you have that loaded, you can actually click on this motion design button that will appear in your toolbar. Now I've already done that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this because it's making me a little dizzy, but you can open the motion design kind of window in the interface here, and then you can also switch the mode to motion design, and it will give you access to some really awesome tools here. And these are similar tools that we've had in the past, but they actually function a little bit more like a DCC would, by actually drawing it in the camera view. I'll show you some of that stuff as well once we get done with the tour. Then we have another line of buttons here. So we have operator stack, remote control, material designer, create defaults, which is actually really handy, and then transition logic. This is more for like broadcast media type stuff. And then the outliner, we have a new outliner, and this is more indicative of like Blender or Cinema 4D. The way that it works, you can color code things, you can organize them, you can hide things in the render, you can hide things in the viewport, you can lock items. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. And then of course you can see all these, they're pretty much like tags in Cinema 4D, but it shows you what's assigned to an object. You can see here that I'm using a bin deformer, which is really cool, a subdivide, and then yeah, a dynamic mesh converter. We'll take a look at all this stuff. This is kind of just a example project that I kind of whipped up one day after work. But yeah, this is really, really awesome that we have this enhanced outliner here. It makes our lives as motion designers a lot easier compared to what the standard outliner is, which, you know, this outliner is fine just for games and things like that, right? Like most times in games, you're doing stuff in code and you're not really gonna pay attention so much to the outliner. But as motion designers, we like to attach nulls, which you can build nulls, parent them, drag them into the sequencer, and have a fun time. So let's go over here to this new panel. So you can get this new panel by saying motion design viewport. So here's the standard cinematic viewport, which you may be used to if you've done linear content in Unreal Engine. And then you have the default viewport, which we always see in game development and what's been in Unreal for a long time. But this motion design viewport is really cool because you can use the mouse wheel. If I hold the mouse wheel in, I can zoom in down to the pixel to see if things are actually making contact. I have a ruler here. I have a lot more features that motion designers are going to care about in terms of linear content. Safe frames, masks. You can change the actor colors. You can take like high resolution screenshots. You can align actors based on the actual actors you have selected, but also how they appear in the actual screen in the viewport, which is really super handy for text and things like that, as we'll see later on. But you can isolate things that you do have selected. You can toggle boxes, bounding boxes on things. So you can see that I'm toggling the shoe that's selected. I can toggle my safe frames. I can also toggle different guides that I may have activated. I can do, let's see, toggle shape editor overlay, which is pretty cool once you get into like drawing shapes. Viewport overlay visibility on and off. You can actually do snapping with a grid, which is really, really cool. And then you can get a lot more different viewport information, like what size is my viewport right now. All kinds of awesome stuff. So this is extremely handy as a motion designer. And I believe I'm not leaving anything else out, but you can also create tabs with this. So, you know, I can tab the viewport and then I can bring up another viewport by going up to here. And then suddenly I have another dockable viewport that I could just use the tumble around the scene just like we always do. Okay. And then the sequencer and remote control have been updated in this version for some pretty cool new features. The one thing I think that's pretty big is the level actually now has a sequence with it. So you don't have to, you know, traditionally you would have to come in here and build like a sequencer folder, take the sequencer actor, drag it into the actor, or sorry, drag it into the viewport so it becomes an actor. And, you know, you don't have to do that anymore, really. It's more or less tied to the level. And if you are wanting to export that, you can export that out into its own asset, or you can apply different presets that you have. You can also stack these, play these back. It's actually really, really cool. And then we have different buttons over here. So this panel is kind of new, but yeah, it allows you to do different kind of looping things. This is more like if you had something running for broadcast or, you know, you're doing like reviews, you can actually set some of that stuff up here. And it's super, super handy. So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff. Things aren't looking too different, but it's actually really, really helpful to have a lot of these things here. So let's take a look at the operator stack real quick. This houses all the modifiers and animators. So modifiers would be something like, you can see here, converting this static mesh into a dynamic mesh, which allows me to do things like subdivisions and a bend deformer, which is super cool. And I'm using this bend deformer to actually bend the shoe as it comes down and makes contact with the rock. So you can drag all that stuff into sequencer and start animating with it. It's very, very user friendly. The subdivide here doesn't actually do like Catmull-Clark subdivisions or open subdivs. It actually just divides the mesh so that you can have a better bend deformation on the dynamic mesh. So you have to add these into sequences. You can build things out and it can become semi-procedural in that manner, which is super awesome. Let's see if we can find an animator in here. I do not believe I have an animator attached, but you can do some really fun things. Like if I was just to grab this shoe and add an oscillate on the, let's just do this, the X or the Y Z, you can see that you can get kind of procedural animation, more or less. It's kind of like running a noise through it, or the sine function through this, which is really super cool. You know, a lot of this stuff, you just need things kind of moving and undulating for motion graphics to appear on screen. So that stuff is super awesome that this is incorporated in here. It makes stuff really, really easy to build up quick animations. You also have remote control, which has been in the engine before, but remote control is actually a pretty powerful tool. You can use this in conjunction with like broadcast or kind of live design type stuff. But what you can do is you can drag in a group of properties and create controls very easily. So if you needed to switch out graphics, switch colors, let's say you're doing like sports teams and you need to switch up the colors, you can drag those into the property field and create controllers so that you can easily just toggle between things. And we can dive into that a little bit later if you guys are interested in seeing that. Another really awesome addition is the material designer, which I'll show you in another example. But this is a way that you don't have to actually dive into the old material editor here. So if you're not really trying to get too involved with nodes, you can use material editor to create kind of animated backgrounds, if you will. You could take textures and animate them and pan them really easily, and you stack them up in layers just like Photoshop. So that stuff is super welcomed, and for designers, you're going to feel right at home because a lot of the traditional design tools are built in that way. Okay, so we'll actually cover some of these here in another example. I just want to show you guys some stuff that I've built really quickly. This was just something that I did after work. I got the model from Sketchfab, so props to the guy who actually scanned it and allowed me to use it for free, but it's just something you can download. So eventually Fab will be probably incorporated at some point into the engine. I'm assuming kind of like Quixel Bridge is. So, you know, being able to grab stuff from Fab and UEFN to build up Fortnite maps is like super cool. So I think we're going to see that eventually in Unreal Engine Vanilla, just the actual editor itself. There actually is, if you go to plugins and you type in Fab, this is it says pre-release Fab plugin. So it's kind of like setting up, I guess, the incorporation into Fab into the engine. So that's going to be worked on, I'm sure, very heavily in the future, so that we can use things like that. Another cool thing that's in this system here, you can see that I had to update the cloners because they're actually moving around like particles, but we have cloners now, so you can create things like very fast, very kind of semi-procedurally, like we kind of have these like particles floating in the background. So all this stuff was built up very simply just from assets from Quixel and Sketchfab, pulling them together using nulls to animate, dragging them into Sequencer to kind of add some very simple keyframes, and you can build up something extremely fast and then be able to render out these iterations through what I'm using here is just Lumen. But the Pathtracer also has a lot of updates that are coming. We actually have, if you come down to, let's see if we can find this. I believe it's path tracing. Oh, here we go. Adaptive sampling. So if you hit the question mark and you look at your output log, it will actually tell you that 0 is off and 1 is on. So adaptive sampling, for you guys who have used offline renderers before, you basically don't have to render every pixel to the same quality. It knows where the noise threshold is and it will stop rendering that pixel. So we're actually going to get faster renders with the Pathtracer, and Pathtracer at this point is just as good as any Pathtracer really that's out there. So it's really exciting to be able to use this. You can see how fast it's going with my screen recording and everything, but just having a ground truth to look at here in the engine is just absolutely genius that they've incorporated something like this. I know they use it a lot to kind of troubleshoot Lumen. So if Lumen is doing something weird, there's a result here that's not showing up with the Pathtracer, with the ground truth. I think that's how they kind of are developing Lumen in tandem. But for me, Lumen looks just as good as the Pathtracer for a lot of these scenes that I'll show you. I think you'll agree, especially as we move on to showing some of the new Lumen implementations into the post-processing, like volume with ray trace reflections and so on and so forth. So this example was the first one that I made, and then I made a few others that I'll show you. If you come into here, I did a Let's see, a Vision Pro kind of demo. So I really want a Vision Pro. I'm really into VR and developing for VR. And so, when I heard that Apple was releasing a headset, of course, I was like super excited about it. So anyways, I did like kind of like an Apple commercial-esque based on some of the stuff that's on their website. So if you go to apple.com, you go to the Vision Pro, you can actually see this kind of animation. But yeah, all this stuff was rendered out at 60 frames a second under half an hour, most of these for a couple hundred frames. So it's really crazy that we have this type of quality here in the engine. Like these are Lumen reflections. They are hit lighting reflections. So they are using, I'm assuming, DXR libraries to do ray tracing. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. One thing that I have to say is that, speaking of ray tracing, they have taken out the ray tracing option from the post-processing, which is good. In the future, we're gonna, just not use that stuff anymore that was there before. The older implementations of DXR, of what they had in the engines, it was just slow. This is built for real time, for games. So the most demanding media that's out there in the world is games. So we have budgets that we have to hit, and it's really cool that they're doubling down on Lumen. And also you can use a screen space beta. But also in the reflections, you only have an option between screen space and Lumen. But it's really cool. We have more options here to actually use. So, of course, we have the quality slider, hit lighting for reflections, and then we can actually do screen traces, which in this example, both in the globe illumination and reflections, you can see that it doesn't really make a huge difference for screen traces, but this will help bring in a little bit more quality based on what's available on pixels on the screen to do some more effects within globe illumination and reflections. And then we also have most of the other same settings that we've had before, but we also have max roughness to trace. So we can trace every single pixel on screen, or we can just limit that to a roughness value of 0.6. So that's great that we have the option here. You can see as I slide this up and down, reflections are everything when it comes to lighting. So it's really great to see that we can trace really rough pixels as well as mirror-like pixels. And then we can set the reflection bounces and refraction bounces. So this headset, this model, which I also got from Sketchfab, I believe, is pretty awesome. And you can see that this layer is a refractive layer, and you can see the Epic HQ in the background as the environment map. But you can actually build out some pretty realistic looking glass materials and be able to trace a certain number of bounces through them, which is great to just have that option. One thing that I want to show you, this is all based on Lumen and Nanite. So if I go to Nanite triangles here and I zoom way in, this is absolutely bonkers. But these are actually like displaced triangles on top of this mesh. So what you are seeing is displacement with Nanite running in real time. I don't know how they do this kind of stuff, but it's absolutely mind-blowing that this is just a displacement texture. And prove it to you, I'll show you. We can open up this cloth displacement, and now we have just the red channel going into this displacement. And then if you search over here, you have to actually invoke it, I believe. Let's see. So if we were to scroll down, maybe under advanced, and let's see, we'll find it eventually. Here we go. Nanite displacement, enable tessellation, and then magnitude and center. Similar to like offline render engines, you usually have parameters that are very specific to how you're doing stuff like this. And then I'm also using virtual textures in this project. So I'm using virtual textures, Nanite, Lumen, virtual shadow maps, and I believe that's the recipe for next gen kind of looking graphics. All these things have to kind of stream together to provide the highest quality possible. There are some instances where lights in these scenes are actually ray traced as well, just to get higher, softer shadows, higher quality, softer shadows, stuff like that. One other thing about the Nanite displacement is that you have to currently invoke that in a INI. So let me show you real quick. Okay, so I have opened the default engine INI in Visual Studio Code, and you can see that I had to set these parameters r.nanite.allow tessellation equals 1 and nanite tessellation equals 1. So these arguments have to be true in order for the engine to restart and have the availability to use displacement. You cannot set that as a CVAR. I believe you have to set that in the INI. I believe that is something that is still marked as experimental, but I want to show you if you come up to the plugins and you type displacement. There's also Nanite Display Mesh, which is in beta. Asset and component types that provide a basic pre-displacement pipeline for Nanite meshes. I'm not super sure what this is used for. This might be like a runtime game type component. Anyways, you can see I don't have it enabled, but it is something that you may want to keep an eye on for your projects later on down the road. Okay, let's look at another example before I just kind of wing it and show you guys some more fun stuff. Okay, so we basically just have the cloners set up with different colored cubes. So each of these childs have different materials, different colored materials. We use a material parameter collection to drive just a particle multiplier. It's just a emissive multiplier that goes into one of the materials. And then we have an orange cloner with a with effectors, different types of effectors here. So if I move these around, these should update. So let's change this one. You can see this one just kind of cuts the hole out. And this one is just for the scale of the orange. And you might be able to see it if I go back to game mode and grab this and just kind of disable this on and off. But yeah, it just changes the size of them. And then I also have some more effectors. So this one I named plane effector. But I believe this is, let's see, what is this guy doing? Oh, it's just changing the offset. So if I was to increase this, yeah, there you go. You can see that it changes how the orange cloners are reacting. And then we also have this random effector. So this is just set to random and set to the plane, and this is animated. So this is actually the thing, once it animates, it wipes on the random noise undulation that happens in the animation. And then if we were to go into some of the pulse and the wiggle, you can see here under the operator stack, you can get to it in the top left, that we have this wiggle rotation that turns on and off the effect on the cloner. And then we have the pulse that makes it jump up and down. So you add those two together and you get something kind of cool. And these are turned on based on the world time. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there is an animator's magnitude down there, and this will turn everything on above it. So anything that's in this list, this little animator's magnitude slider is super handy to animate so that the world time, as you see, it completely keeps going on and on and on. And yeah, that allows that to pop on and animate. So that's pretty much this example. Let's move on to the other one. Okay, this example is pretty basic, and I'm not really a designer when it comes to these kind of motion graphics per se. Like I don't do a whole lot of After Effects kind of 2D type stuff, but just wanted to show you that it can be done. And you can see this is completely 3D, but you can just draw everything into this window and then start animating them. So I'll show you, I'll break down these shapes. So this shape here, if you come down and look at the operator stack, I have this outline effect, and then I also have the plane cut. So the plane cut is just spinning around, making it kind of look like it's drawing itself on in a way. These shapes are the rectangular 2D shapes, and I am animating the mesh size, which is really cool because it still respects the slant parameter here. I don't know if it's called slant per se, but it allows it to kind of skew, and it's cool that you can animate those parameters and it respects that, so you can do these open and close type animations. For the text on the back, I didn't actually need to use this dynamic mesh converter to use the outline effect. The text actually has an outline effect by itself right here at the bottom. So if I was to hide my webcam, sorry about that. If you scroll down to the bottom, there is an outline tick box here to be able to do extrude bevels and just outline this. So I didn't need to actually use the modifier. The other cool thing about this example is if I was to open the material designer, this is super powerful. And I'm just doing this on a very basic type of, in a very basic type of way, but you can see there's some animation subtly in the background on these textures. So if I was to hide perhaps one of these, I think that one is the one that's animating. There we go. You might be able to see that a little bit better on the YouTube compression, maybe not. But there is a texture right here that you can see in the little preview window. It's just stripes, and I'm using an effect called UV Panner. So in order to get the effects, you use the Add Layer Effect button, so you can add it into the alpha of the layer. This is set to Overlay, and that allows you to just pan the UVs of the texture to get these kind of really cool broadcast looking graphics. And then you can see I have a vignette. This is set to multiply with a radial gradient on top. The very bottom layer is a linear gradient, and of course you can spin these around any way you like. This just gets super easy to use. This one here is just a regular texture with this cool pattern, and I changed the scale of it. So you stack these up like Photoshop and you're off to the races in no time, basically. So that's actually really super handy, and just wanted to show you this quick example that, yeah, you can do these 2D kind of After Effects types of animations. So let's move on. Okay, so this is kind of our little playground area. This is where we'll kind of wrap up the video, but I've added this effect here, the chevron cloner. I just wanted to show you that you can use these operators here to create some oscillating animations. So it looks like this is going on forever, but I'm actually using the sawtooth function to snap it back. So in the camera, it looks like they continuously move to the right, but this stuff is super easy to set up in here. So let's look at some more examples. I wanted to show you again, just a cloner with an effector driving the size and scale of these objects here. So that stuff is really fun to do, really easy to do. And then we also have shapes that can be swept, I guess, along the spline. So you can animate these as well. So if I was to go into the operator stack and modifiers here, you can actually progress this along the spline. So I'll show you how to set that up. And then we also have, booleans. I almost said bevels, but booleans. Under the operator stack, we have 2 effects. So we can do an extrude effect. Once we extrude it, then we can cut it into the shape. This is set to subtract from the target, and then you can see once I clicked on the background rectangle, this is set to target channel 0, which allows me to just specifically target this guy. And of course this is completely dynamic and it works in real time. It's amazing that we can do these kind of shapes and cut them out. Okay, so let's build some effects here so I can give you a taste of what this is like. To go ahead and get this working. So if I was to come over here to the motion design panel, let's work in our grid here. I could turn it on and make sure that we snap and toggle to it, and I can drag out a rectangle. And let's see, I need to go ahead and set my toggles here. So there we go. Now I'm snapping to the grid. So you can draw all this stuff out. You can grab the corners of these rectangles. You can grab this guy here. It's like a little wheel type thing. And this will round out the edges. So if I could just grab it, there we go. You left click and drag and pull that down. And then we can also grab the little slanted guy here and pull that out too. So if I was to make this straight, you can do slanted sides. And then let me go ahead and hide my webcam so we can look at the details panel. There's a lot of really cool stuff down here for the materials. You can do linear gradients really quickly and change the way those look. I can change it to unlit. So this way there's no actual shading information and it really looks 2D. And if we come down, we can start changing a lot of those parameters. So we got the slants. Oh, it is called slants. Great. So there we got this really cool shape. And then we can add bevels to it, global bevels. And if I was to do that on all sides, you can see I can get them rounded. Subdivisions, and then those particular parameters do live on the top left and top right. You can change all of these. So you can really dial in what looks cool to you. And yeah, these rectangles are just amazing. They're I know it sounds kind of weird, but I mean, yeah, it's pretty amazing just to have these to be able to draw out really quickly. And then of course, if I was to come up to my operator stacks, I can do extrusions on them, as you can see in this right viewport. So definitely extrude. I can add a bevel, a taper, plane cut. Plane cut is super fun to work with. So yeah, we can yeah, do some fun animations like that, or just actually move it, grow it on type effect. I can come in here, do a mirror, which could be really wacky when you have things kind of like animating and moving around on screen. I can add bevels, so pretty amazing that we can do these. I would suggest don't be like me and don't slide these things, but as you can see, this can as you move these iterations and stuff, you might want to make those a little bit higher so that the solve is a little more accurate. But yeah, you can do stuff like that. And there's some more, you know, we got bend, Boolean, of course. So I could set this to be the target and then come over here to, let's just draw an ellipse. Okay, and we'll add a extrude. You can see how fast this actually works. So something like that. And I need to add another Boolean modifier here, and then say that we need to subtract from channel 0, which this is set to channel 0. So if this is set to 1, it won't work. They both need to be on the same channels, and then we can do some cool stuff. Okay, so let's look at something else. I am going to do, I'll keep my background in there. Okay, I want to show you guys the splines and the cloners. So let's go ahead and look at the cloners first. So if we drop that in, you can see it works pretty much like Cinema 4D, where I can come in here and change the child. So we'll go ahead and delete that, and we'll add a sphere, let's say. Put that under the cloner, and it just works. So this is pretty sweet to have. There's a lot of parameters under here that we'll look at. So we can, of course, enable or disable it. We can change the seed if we have some random effects in here. We can spawn linked effectors to it. So I'll go ahead and do that and disable this for now until we get to that point. We can reduce motion ghosting with TSR. We have lines that we can create in terms of the look. We can do circles, like radial effects. We can do sphere unions, or we can do sphere randoms, or we can copy it onto a mesh. Honeycombs are really cool. So we can do honeycomb patterns. And then we can actually do splines. So to do splines, we can grab a spline actor. And I'm going to take this off of game mode real quick and do the same thing over here by hitting G on the keyboard. And I can grab one spline component, little vertice, hold Alt to click and drag. And so I have my shape. Then when I come back to my cloner, I can actually sample that same spline, which is great. And you can change the number. You can orient the meshes however you want along the spline. So if I had a cone, and let's put the cone under there as well, you can see that they iterate And then on the clone, I can orient them to the spline, and it will do its best to kind of orient it based on the tangent of the spline. And we can set that to random. We can set it to blend. So half of them are cones, half of them are those weird looking Mentos spheres that I made. But yeah, you can add different colors on them. So let's go ahead and say have a single material that is orange. Why not? And a single material that is blue. And once we go back to our cloner and we say blend, you can obviously see how that works. And yeah, you can change the way that they're facing. And yeah, this works really, really well. You can also come down to the progress to animate them popping on. You can do different things like the step for rotation and scale. So if I was to scale these, you can see that they iterate through and step in those parameters. I can do different ranges, rotation, minimum. So minimum and maximum rotation on the Z. So they offset themselves from the spline based on these arguments here. And then we can do scale as well. We can also do things like we can actually have them kind of pop on and spawn at a different rate, which is really, really cool. And if I change the rate, then they should come on faster. So just some really awesome stuff that's in here. We can also do lifetime. So they can basically, let's go ahead and change this back to rate. And there you can see, you can change just the way that these splines are, so that change the animation based on the scale. So pretty cool stuff. Really, really fun ways to bring on different clones. Okay, as you can recall, I spawned a linked effector, but that's one thing about effectors is that they need to be added to the cloners in this array. So if we had another effector, we need to actually add another entry into the list, or we just need to go ahead and spawn one that's already linked. So something that to keep in mind, similar to how Cinema 4D works. But if we were to move this through here, you can see that it's by default, the mode, you can do location, rotation, and scale. So this is just, these are kind of offsets based on how it's passing through. And you can change the mode to target so that that kind of looks at the effector as it passes through, which is really cool. You can change what the target is. You can also do a noise field. So if I was to increase the Z there, you can see that this kind of runs a noise through it. But if I increase the frequency, you can really tell. So yeah, very cool that it runs a noise through there. This is super fun. This noise isn't quite the same as a random effector that you would see in Cinema 4D. To do that, you can, of course, change the type. Let's go ahead and change this to a plane, just for example's sake. And then you can change the spacing. But to get more of like a random effector, you can change this to random and then move this through. And if we were to change this, then you can see they're in a random position, and then once I pass through it, the plane, they go back to their positions on the spline. So that's really cool. There's some really fun different kinds of profile shapes in here for this easing parameter. So yeah, it looks like they're, as you come through, it looks like they kind of bounce into place, which is really fun. We also have stuff like orientation forces. So if I was to put this back to linear, this more or less kind of acts like particles. So as they move through, let's go ahead and move this back to 0. As we move this through, they kind of like spin based on these orientation parameters. We also have one that's like a vortex, and I think by default it's maybe too high. Let's put that at something much lower, and then we'll force the update again. And this should cause them to actually spin around this point in space, which is really, really cool that you can do vortices and vortexes. And then we also have like a curl noise, which by default, again, the strength is probably too high and the frequency is probably needs to be played with, but you can do curl noise, and then you can also do an attraction force. So let's change this back to a sphere, and of course we're going to force this update, and there we go. With the sphere, if I grab the effector, you can see that it's attracted. If it loses attraction, it kind of falls off in the vector, and it flies off in the vector that it was going at before. And then we have a gravity force. So as I move this through, they'll actually fall. So some fun, really cool animations I know that you guys could come up with this system. And of course, you know, check out the text object here. If I was to grab this and put it into place, all of the parameters, let me go ahead and hide myself once again, are listed under the details window. So pretty much everything you need to change for things like text and shapes will be under this details window. You can do fun things like they have these little 3D transform presets, more or less, for location and for scale. So if I turn that on, it scales the text up. You can animate those rotations in there. Of course, you can extrude the text, and for the style, make sure that it's set to not be unlit. So there's some dimension there, and you can, again, change it to the outline. You can change the bevel on the text, and all of your system fonts are here, which is super, super nice. So you have project fonts, and then you have system fonts. And so this is great to have just access to all the different fonts on your machine. And then we have different things we can do for color, extrusions, bevels. All this is here. And of course you can use the material designer as well. Okay, and just a few more things that aren't really quite new to Project Avalanche, but maybe gets you in kind of the headspace of like, yeah, this is something I want to work in, which you definitely do. It's an incredible tool, but you can build out these camera rig rails as you see here, and then you can attach the cameras to them and animate them along the splines to get some like really cool animation. So that's what's happening here. That's why it looks so smooth. All this is procedural and can be moved around in any way that you want. But there's one other thing that I did that I thought was kind of cool. And if you guys want to see a tutorial on building your own editor utility functions, these are basically just little event-driven functions that you can put into a panel with UI, more or less. You can kind of design this however you want. But this is so I can select the cameras and change them on the fly. I can also change up my lens length here, my focal length, just to try stuff out and see what works. And then I can change my scalability settings here from high to cinematic, and of course epic is what you get out of the box. But this allows me to kind of like save on GPU overhead and just be able to have fun with what I'm doing. And yeah, it's all just based in this window here. And if you want to create your own, or if you want to see a tutorial, let me know. But it's under editor utilities. You have to have editor utilities plugins enabled, and then I believe you can gain access to this stuff, the editor utility widget, which is what I'm using. And of course it's just a UI designer, and this is how simple it can be. So for example, if you wanted to do the 16:9 one, or 9:16, whichever, once you fire the button event, you get all your selected actors. You go loop through them, make sure that they are the Cinecamera actor by casting to it. And once you cast to it, you can get the Cinecamera component, and then you change the aspect ratio parameter. And that's what's happening every time I click the button. I believe they have added this in here, which I didn't notice it. Under crop settings, there's an aspect ratio attribute, and that's what I'm changing to be able to flip through 16:9, 9:16, and 1:1. So all that's located under there. And then you can of course change your focal length and all the other camera parameters, and the scalability is done by the execute console command, scalability 2 through 4, 2 being high, epic, and cinematic. So if you guys want to see more of those types of tutorials, let me know. But I'm hoping that this video has opened your eyes to Project Avalanche and the motion design mode inside of Unreal Engine 5.4 coming to you very soon. I appreciate all your time, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I do read all the comments and I try to answer every single comment that happens to be down below, so I really appreciate it. And if you have a suggestion for a video, let me know. And until then, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.